is Officer Andrea Isom. Isom is a 15-year veteran, currently assigned to homicide, instructor at Basic Academy, co-founder of Tab 7, has a twin brother. She's a dog mom. She describes herself that way. A proud Husker alum from Nebraska. She's very passionate about adventure and travel. Congratulations.
Thank you so very much for this award. I come from a family of public servants, teachers, nurses. My twin brother Alex is here tonight, over there. He's a firefighter because, you know, someone's got to play video games, take naps, and occasionally I guess go into a clean building or something like that. So I think public service has kind of always just been my future, and I always wanted to be a homicide detective, and I've had some of the best detectives working with me to teach me everything. This award, I think, just means so much because it's from your peers, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who are with you at the academy, getting smoked for the 100th time, usually by Mike Mata, and that was me. They're with you at crime scenes at 4 in the morning, and you're on your third murder of the night, and you're running on 2 hours of sleep and a gallon of coffee. So I'm so grateful for the people who came out tonight, all my friends I've known since the academy days, and my partner, Steve, my old trainer, and thankful to my family who supported me, so thank you very much.
Detective Andrea Isom.
If we don't have a lot of witnesses, sometimes you have, like a body dump and you don't even know where to start. And that's when you rely on the ME's office for the autopsy and say, okay, what did they die from? What kind of object am I looking for? How long have they been dead? And just to kind of go backwards. The thing I love about investigations, I guess, is that you never know how a case is going to pop. Like, you don't know if it's going to be the magic phone call or if it's going to be a fingerprint or if it's going to be something on a cell phone. And so you want to check all the boxes, cast a very wide net. And then later on, that one thing will come back and you're like, I'm so glad I tried that, because you don't know how it's going to solve. If you have 2 witnesses in the same car or in the same area, they're influencing each other's statements. They're repeating each other as opposed to from their memory. I always tell people in cases, even though we're all in the same room, I'm looking at this corner, you're looking at that corner. So we all have different perspectives, and you may have seen something another witness didn't, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong or he's wrong. It just means that you have a different perspective. So getting those statements from witnesses to be as authentic as possible without influence of each other is so significant, I think. And it can make a huge difference in an investigation. This guy, this terrible human being, he killed his 2 kids, his wife, and himself. And when we got there to the hotel, he had killed them, I think the night before, and then killed himself right before we all got out there. And he tucked himself in bed with them. So he moved his wife into the side, and then he put his arm around everybody, and he put their hands so that they were all holding hands. And then he shot himself.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
A person commits criminal homicide if he intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal negligence causes the death of an individual. This is the Texas Penal Code definition of criminal homicide. In 1935, Captain Fritz was put in charge of the Dallas PD Robbery and Homicide Unit. He was known as a skilled interrogator. He quickly began forming a reputation for the Dallas Homicide Unit. They were known for their unique Stetson hats and wide dress shirts. The shirts are a tradition that still is used today by detectives in that unit. A Dallas homicide detective job never stops. Stats will show you a lot of change in Dallas from the year 1930, which saw 20 murders, to a time span from 1989 to 1992. The city of Dallas saw nearly 1,700 murders. 1991 was the deadliest with 500. That was during the deadly drug wars when the Jamaicans hit town. The city of Dallas has seen it all. Officers murdered, a president murdered, high-profile serial killers such as the Texas Eyeball Killer, and a more recent serial killer of nursing home patients. The skill and patience to comb over hours of video footage, witness statements, putting together a puzzle from all the cell phone tower pings to DNA to ballistic reports. These puzzles are never easy, and sadly, the city of Dallas has a lot of whodunits. ATO fans, this is Joe King. Today I'm sitting with an expert of puzzles. She joined DPD in 2007, started in the assaults unit in 2013, and joined Dallas Homicide in 2015. To unwind, she enjoys traveling, reading, and not just her case files. She's a baker, and her homicide peers are often lab rats to her culinary skills. She is badge 9272. She is Dallas Homicide Detective Andrea Isom. Andrea, thanks for coming on.
Hello, thank you for having me.
ATO fans, you're hearing from her. This is her peers talking. One of the best, if not the best, Dallas Homicide Detectives in that unit.
They just want my cookies, I think.
Or they just didn't want to do this podcast.
Or that too. I think, I think I got nominated by John because he didn't want to do it himself.
No, John wanted to do it, and he actually has a question.
John does?
He wanted me to ask you.
Okay.
Why do they call you Miss Ting?
Man, that is just John. I hate him. He is the only person that calls me that. And he says it's because I get any ting I want,
Okay.
which is such BS. God,
You
John.
can say bullshit.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
John
Yeah.
Valdez, that's bullshit.
He was my old partner.
Yeah.
I'm well aware he's full of bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
He said it in our last episode, actually, with the great Bob Stern with the ticket. All right. I did a straw poll of your peers of who would be a good detective to come on to represent the homicide unit, because a lot of our listeners have reached out. They want to hear from Dallas PD's homicide, which, we're a violent ass city, just like any major city. And your peers, several of them, including John, he said you would be the best to come on here.
That's really nice to hear.
I always like to say your reputation isn't what you think of yourself. Everybody's got their own opinion of themselves, whether it's, they don't want to come out and admit they're really good at something, or some people are just insecure about certain things. Your peers and what other people think of you, that's your reputation. And I have to say this, working up in legal, seeing all these cases and working with all you detectives, your reputation is incredible. And it's really, it's really hard to get some of your peers to say something nice about you.
It is. You should hear what they say, up there just on the floor. So,
yeah.
But thank you. That's very nice.
Yeah, you just go with the Miss Ting. Maybe I'll redo the intro with. I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that.
I mean, my nickname in the academy was Baywatch, and that was from Mike Mata.
I'm not shocked by that.
Yeah, I don't think Avery Moore was CT there, and I don't think he ever knew my real name. Like when I saw him,
Baywatch.
He always, how's it going, Baywatch? And that was.
They said you had that Pamela Anderson on your desk over there.
Yeah, I think Jason Gingerat did that when I was on assaults or somebody. So there's a lot of nicknames from Smash and stuff like that. Yeah,
after this post, we may have a lot more Photoshop with your face and
we'll
Pamela
see.
Anderson.
Who knows? Yeah. It's always something.
Are you ready to get into this?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
Starting off with some easy ones. Where'd you grow up?
I am from Kansas City, Missouri, so Midwesterner, born and raised, and moved down here after college. So,
what was family life like for you there?
My parents, they're high school sweethearts, and they're still together, 39 years of marriage. My family is really close. We always car rides for Christmas, and, we'll travel 10, 12 hours, things like that. So family's always been really important. I have a twin brother and a younger sister. So they're both still in Missouri. I'm kind of the lone wolf that went out of state. My mom hates that, but yeah.
What does your twin do?
My twin brother is a firefighter, so he gets paid to be asleep. And
Wow,
yeah.
work out.
Oh my gosh, he's
Yeah.
always. I caught up on Game of Thrones. I'm like, man, but he loves it. Like he's the only son in our family, and when he found firefighting, it really is that camaraderie and that brotherhood. He has friends that are like his brothers. I mean, he's friends of 35 years kind of a thing. So when he got into firefighting, like it really was so good for him because he's not like a desk kind of a guy. And so being out doing stuff like that, and he's up for captain right now in his department in Columbia, Missouri.
What is his name?
Alex Isom.
Shout out Alex. What department is he?
Columbia Fire Department.
All right, shout out Columbia. We'll be sending your PIO this
Yeah, definitely.
this podcast. All right. Growing up, what profession did you want to go in?
I didn't really know. So when it was time to go to college, I was like, okay, like, what am I going to do? And I hate math and science. So I was kind of like, what doesn't require that? I had a teacher in high school who was a former FBI agent. And I thought that was always kind of badass because she was this kind of little Southern older woman and she was an FBI agent. And so I was like, if she can do this, So I saw criminal justice and I was like, I love like Law and Order and that kind of stuff. I've always loved puzzles. And so I was like, I'll give it a shot. But I always thought I was going to go federal. I thought FBI because you see FBI on TV and it's FBI. So I was like, I'm going to do FBI or I'm going to be a homicide detective. And
so you knew early on this is what you wanted to be in a homicide unit.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think that like it was, I like investigations and homicide is like, if you can make it in homicide, there's not much else you couldn't do it. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like varsity. Like if you're going to do it, you want to do like the hardest thing you can and be good at it. If you can do that, then like, you earned your stripes, you belong there. So
Homicide's so different because you really don't have, unlike you came from assaults, and usually in the Dallas PD they start in assaults or robbery or family violence, and you get a lot of you gain a lot of skills for interviewing folks, and then homicide opens or SIU or then you move up there.
Yeah.
And this is unique from dealing with assaults where you had complainants.
Yeah, I mean, so like I applied for a lot of different places, like property crimes. I didn't get it, and you're like, am I ever going to be a detective? And then I got assaults, and I had a great trainer. Tommy Carroll was my trainer in assaults, and I love Tommy.
I love Tommy.
Showed me so much stuff about how to go from street cop to detective, and but yeah, people can tell you what happened, and sometimes they're kind of full of it, and sometimes they're not. But assaults, you have the whole gambit of everything from like a little bar fight, someone threatening you, to being shot 10 times and somehow surviving. And so you get a lot of different broad kind of cases, but you definitely get the reps in for talking to people and doing the initial investigation. So
yeah, I see their caseload.
Oh, yeah.
And it is insane. We're going to get into that later. Had you ever been to Texas before?
A couple times. So I was down here for the Cotton Bowl in 2001 when I was on Dance Line with the band. And so I performed.
Wow.
It
Okay,
was,
I didn't get into this.
It was at K-State in Tennessee. And we did not pack warm clothes because we were like, it's Texas and it snowed. So I was marching in the West End with my pom-poms with 3 inches of snow on my pom-poms. And I was like, what the hell, Texas? Like,
Yeah, well, now you know.
oh
how
yeah,
this
now
is.
that I live here, yeah, I never thought I was going to be moving to Dallas, but
Yeah.
so I was here when I was sophomore or junior in high school, I think. So yeah,
What college did you go to?
University of Nebraska.
Oh, wow.
Go Big Red.
Tina Schultz will love that.
Oh, is she a Husker fan?
She's from Nebraska.
Oh, I didn't
She's
realize
from
that.
Iowa, but she went to Nebraska of Omaha, I believe.
Oh,
it's
UNO?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, she played basketball over there.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, she loves it up there.
Me too.
It's
a
a
good
lot,
life.
It's very wholesome. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many friends from college and my sorority and stuff who are from small town Nebraska, and like just going up there, I just like my shoulders relax and it's just peaceful and people are just so nice. I don't know, it's that Midwestern.
She's from Council Bluff, Iowa. So
Yeah.
you know that's that. Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick, since we're on that topic, I want to give a shout out to Cedar Rapids officer that reached out. Thank you for listening, and definitely thank you for reaching out. It means a lot to me and the other ATL staff that saw your feedback. Just know we're with you, and you can reach out to me anytime. Thank you. When you were in Nebraska, you were still moving towards your goal. You wanted to become a detective, right? You're getting to law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple of years you have your prereqs and stuff like that, and so I was like, okay, I wasn't really sure. I was 18, but as I got into the higher level CJ classes, I took a serial killer class, I took an organized crime class, just really interesting stuff. I remember taking a terrorism class, and I took my textbook on an airplane. And this is like not that long after 9/11, probably not the best idea.
No.
But I had one of my teachers knew a serial killer in Kansas City, Bob Bordeaux, I believe. He used to sell her weed. And so, she was like, yeah, talk to Bob after he did all this stuff. And I was like, that is so cool. I mean, like the psychology of it and just like what's in someone's mind.
Did you watch Mindhunters?
Oh, I love that show.
I read the book.
Really hope there's a second season.
Third.
Or third, yeah. Is there a third one coming?
The second one was dealing over the Atlanta child murders. Remember
yeah,
that?
I do remember that. Yeah,
that's a great show.
So good. Yeah.
You read a lot of serial killer books or studies?
I mean, some, not as much as I'd like, but I've gone to a couple of different, case studies and things like that. And I help out. I'm starting to help out with FLETC with their interview interrogation, which is Palmer and Quirk are involved in that down there. Who are
I love them.
Legendary homicide detectives. But they did that. Yeah, do that. Yeah. Hey, John, and Quirk. But they do the where they go into the jails and they were interviewing suspects about like, why did you talk, and the psychology of interrogation, and like, what did the detective say that pushed you towards it or pulled you from it, and we learned from that. And so like they were doing like a presentation for several years, I think first 48 to 360 something like that with Kevin Navarro. And it's just such good information for detectives because you can get in the psychology of interrogations like for hours, and it's just interesting.
Because I would imagine there is a common theme in some of these minds that you can pick up on as a detective, and you can kind of, I'm not going to say exploit, but you can use to your advantage.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It is fascinating. I honestly, when I was getting out of high school or in high school, I was always fascinated by like the Zodiac Killer and Ted Bundy and all the, Ed Gein, all those folks. It's very fascinating in those minds. And just imagine all the ones that nobody knows about that they did.
Oh my gosh.
Ted Bundy went across the country.
Yeah. It's amazing. And like there's something, about watching an interrogation, especially because you're going in there and you're pretty much selling someone, potentially life in prison or something. But even killers or whoever it is, everyone has something they care about. Everyone has something that's kind of like their button or what draws them in. And so it's kind of tapping into that to like understand the humanity or get them to reason or what have you. But it's kind of like patrol. When you go in, they size you up and you size them up a little bit, and so they're thinking they can like outsmart you, outwit you, whatever. And so it's kind of like a mind game a little bit.
Kind of like Hannibal Lecter with Clarice.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
All right. When you get out of college, you applied to DPD.
I applied to DPD in San Francisco PD.
Damn. So it couldn't be any further for the Midwest. You were really trying to escape. Right?
I just, I went to college. I didn't know anybody. And so I wanted a new experience and I wanted a new city. And I thought California would be cool. I went out there and applied and I passed the first round and everything. But they were like, okay, come back a second time for PT and a third time. And I'm like, I just blew all my college graduation money on this plane ticket. And thank God I didn't. Nothing against SFPD, but it's so far from home and some of the policies in their prosecution, I think I'd be really disappointed if I had to be constrained in that. So,
a lot's changed from the early 2000s whenever you were applying. I couldn't imagine working there now.
Yeah.
So you applied for Dallas. They're hiring. And we've talked about it before on this. They usually knock everything out in one day almost.
It was a 3-day weekend.
3-day week, okay.
But it's like 8 hours from Kansas City, so I drove down. And back then, I was part of the 1,000 officer push. Yeah. So they had the big hiring bonus and everything like that. So it seemed like a good fit.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's a big city. You're going to learn. You probably knew you were going to learn a lot.
Yeah. I wanted a big city because I knew I wanted to have opportunities to go to homicide or different units, and like small agencies sometimes, unless someone dies or retires, you're not getting in there. And so
somebody.
Yeah.
We have that here to some degree, but it's still, there's so many opportunities in this city. I've seen more movement in a change in these in all of Capers units. They basically, they have turnover all the time, and they have more positions opening up because caseload's getting heavier, and now
Yeah.
the requirements that we have to give evidence over, that's quadrupled pretty much.
Oh, gosh,
and it happened just, a matter of years, short years. And it takes a long, to investigate and file it properly and to gather the evidence and put it in your retention system and then put it in theirs. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But did you hear anything about Dallas PD's homicide reputation? Did you do any dive into that history?
I mean, I kind of looked into it a little bit. I didn't do a ton, to be honest. I mean, I knew obviously about JFK and all of that. But beyond that, I have an uncle that lives in Hearst. And so I had been here like once or twice before I moved here. But, I liked the size of the department, and I knew that this is a place where you can get reps in terms of whatever you want to do. There's not a shortage of that kind of crime,
Anything.
unfortunately.
Everything.
But yeah, everything. And that's what I didn't know, if I was going to do homicide directly, or I didn't know. I knew this is a good place to learn, and this is a place to really test your skills in what you can do. So,
and also, if you decided to go to the federal side, it is a good farm system, really.
Yeah, and that was initially my plan, was to be a cop for a couple years, get some experience, go federal. And then the more I stayed here, the more I was just like, but I like getting in the foot chase and putting the handcuffs off. I like, interviewing the guy. I want to see the case all the way through. And so that's kind of what, to me, we get to have more hands-on than federal agents do. And, especially when it comes to murder, because there's not really federal murder that's used anyway very often. So,
well, speaking of foot chases and putting handcuffs on, you started off in South Central.
I trained at Northeast, actually.
Okay, Northeast, and you went to South Central.
Yep,
Okay.
I did just my training in Little T at Northeast.
Okay.
And then I was like 5th from the end in the bid list, and so it was pretty much South Central or Southeast, and somebody else in my class wanted Southeast. So I took South Central, and it was such a difference from Northeast.
Yeah.
And it was my first day solo on Channel 7. I was like, holy shit, because it's just the pace. I mean, in the geography, but just the culture too. I think they're so different from Northeast to South Central. So
yeah, and it's a little different from Nebraska, and then going.
It's a lot different from Nebraska. Yeah, I'd never seen heroin in my life, or just everything. It was a huge culture shock. So
well, South Central's got plenty of heroin. The listeners,
heroin, everything.
Yeah,
dealer's choice.
Yeah, heroin, everything. But I've seen my last few years on the streets. I left in October of 16. I got more heroin in those last few years than all the other years combined at Southeast. I mean, and my last year was done at South Central. But South Central. It's the whole Southern. Heroin has gotten so bad in this city.
Yeah.
When you got thrown into patrol, you have to take you take on a lot, and you see a lot. You see a lot of death. You have a lot of you see a lot of emotions from complainants, witnesses. You see a lot of violence.
Yeah.
How did that affect you when you to cope with that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, like I said, Channel 7, I think I went on 4 different triple murders while I was down there in 4 years, just on my shift when I happened to be working, kind of a thing. So that kind of gives you an idea of the murder rate in that division. And just everything, arson and sexual assault and everything. But I had a really good partner in patrol, Brandon Barry, whose SWAT team. Well, I think he just left SWAT.
Yeah, he just left. Yeah. No, shout out Brandon. Yeah,
I love Barry. But we had such a good time. We would just listen to music and go get some felony arrest and maybe try to get a 50 if we could. And having a good, I don't know, usually it's just more grab something to the drive-through and Christmas dinner on the MDC or whatever in the middle. But having a good partner makes such a big difference, because you chit chat about your life while also doing this job and having someone you can really trust. And so we became really good friends and hung out after work as well, and it was nice just to have somebody like that we could rely on. But well,
having a good partner that in. You mentioned the brotherhood before in our profession, in your twins' profession up there in the fire. It is real. So when you're riding around, with somebody for hours on shift, and you have to lean on each other so much. So we got somebody driving, you got somebody working the computer, so you're really You really have to have a true partnership. And I've been with people that I just couldn't stand. I couldn't wait for the 8 hours to be done.
Oh, those are the longest 8 hours.
They
When
are.
you're with somebody, you're like,
But I was really fortunate enough to be with certain partners, and then also I was running with certain groups of the Pat Star, the Matas, the Jaime Castro. I mean, I had some badasses around me, and that was really made it fun.
Absolutely.
But they also could be your therapist. You're like, both of you are sponges, and you're talking about how you coped with a certain incident you went on, or whatever home thing you may have going on in home life, right?
Yeah.
And if you're riding with somebody you don't trust, it's like going to if you don't trust a therapist or you don't trust a program, you're not going to use it.
Oh yeah, and like being in a squad car, I mean, you're 6 feet contained with this other person. Like you are in a very, it's a little different than like working at an office.
It's a constant road trip for
it's
8
a
hours,
constant
40
road
hours a week
trip,
at least.
and you're not getting out of that car for at least 8 hours. And sometimes when you have an overtime call and you're there all night, but yeah, I mean, in those days, especially when I was in patrol, hanging out with my friends from the academy too, we still, would go have drinks together, have dinner, go see a movie. At that time, everybody was still kind of like unmarried and no kiddos yet. So it was a little bit easier to kind of hang out more. But that was always good to kind of like trade stories. And when you're a rookie, you're just like, oh my gosh, what'd you get into last week? And I got this crazy deal. And, you're so, just everything's new and shiny. And so you just love that,
I used to get mad when I would, like Scott McDonald or somebody would call, or they'd say they'd got into a house and I wasn't there for it. I'd get pissed.
Oh my gosh,
I'd get
yes.
mad.
Oh, absolutely. Especially like a cool case. You're like, how did you get on that? I was stuck doing this stupid report and now I missed out on like the coolest case or whatever.
But what's so funny is being a young officer, there's always the next one.
Yeah.
Shit ain't.
There's never going to not be another crazy murder or, interesting foot chase or car chase. It's going to happen. You just got to like be patient and you'll get it eventually.
So you did your time in patrol and you decided you wanted to put your toe in the detective waters, right?
Yeah.
So you applied for assaults.
Yeah, I applied for other places too, and I finally got assaults first. So,
okay. Where else did you apply?
I applied to South Central property crime, Northeast property crime, Southwest property crime, youth, robberies. I know. I was like, what is it?
Well,
about
shame
me?
on the property crime for that. I mean, seriously.
It worked out.
It worked
but
out
at
great.
the time, I was just like, if I can't get my own station property crime, what am I doing wrong?
Wow.
But yeah.
Damn. Okay. So you get to assaults. What was that
I got
like?
to assaults because of John.
Oh, John was there?
Well, no, I took John's spot.
He went to robbery, right?
He went to robbery,
That's right.
so I authorized one more spot, so I took John's spot, and so that's why I got into capers. But yeah, assaults was it was really different from patrol, especially when I went there. I think myself and a couple others were the first 9,000s in capers, and so it was still like you did 10 to 15 years before you get to capers at that time, and now it's like
3 years on. Yeah,
11,000s or it's super, it's way different. And so when I went to assaults, I want to say about 5 on or so. Something like that.
Wow, okay.
And so I was young. I mean, I was 26, 27 years old, and everybody there was a lot older than me, and they had been on for a lot longer than me.
And John looked like he was 60.
Oh, yeah. John's always had the white hair.
John, in 97, John had that look.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
He's going to give me so much shit.
Good. Yeah, you know what? He deserves it.
Oh, yeah.
I've got some funny stories to tell about John.
You should do a whole episode on that.
No, I could. No. Right. Yeah, being partners with him and it's funny. He listens to these too, and he's definitely gonna listen to this one and I can't wait. Him telling that story, falling off the treadmill at 24 Hour Fitness while he was running alongside a lady that was well known at that particular 24 hour. Yeah, John got too far to the edge, and I
wish we could have a surveillance video of that.
Oh yeah,
for his retirement party or something.
Yeah, when he slipped and fell and hit his forehead on the control panel, and it was still rolling, and it shot him out on the floor.
That is awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, what's funny is when he came to the station that night, we're getting ready to go on. He goes, man, I've never been so humiliated in my life. And he had this mark on his forehead, and he goes, promise me you won't tell anybody. I go, I promise. and he tells me the story, and he goes back to the locker room to get dressed, and I think I literally grabbed the first person to walk by and had to tell.
Guess what I just
oh
found
my God,
out.
John just said. Anyway,
Awesome.
love you, John. Nobody listens to this anyway, so don't worry. Nobody's going to hear that story. Kelly already knows. So you did your time in assaults.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So when you're in assaults, there is a thin line between aggravated assault and homicide in some
Oh,
cases.
yeah. Sometimes they jump rope with that, like they're 27, they're not, and
Or weeks or months down the road, people
Yeah.
hang on, and then it turns into a homicide.
I had that happen. So I had a case I worked with Tommy actually in assaults, and then I went to homicide, and the guy died while I was in homicide, and I was
just
still on
adopted it.
training. So I was with Scott Sayers,
Yeah.
and I was on training, and so we took that case and finished it up, solved it, done, and guy like confessed immediately, and I was like, this is so easy. I was just like, oh, this is nothing, and then I quickly learned that I didn't know anything, but yeah, it was interesting.
That is cool. And I'm going to get into kind of some of these shared cases
Yeah.
and how that dynamic works. But so you finally did. They have and at the time you applied for homicide, 2015, right?
Yeah, 2015.
Okay. Was it still it was an older unit at that point?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was back then, I was on an evening squad. And I think that's part of the only reason why I got it, to be honest, because not a lot of guys were wanting to go to evenings because they have families and stuff.
Right.
And so I just thought this was an opportunity. I had been asked to apply before, go over there before, and I just didn't think I was ready. I mean, I was like, I know what I'm doing, but I don't really know. Homicide's a big deal. You don't want
It's
to
a big stage.
Yeah, it's the big leagues, and so you don't want to go before. You don't want to fail and mess up a homicide case. So I waited until I had at least a couple years under my belt. I had 2.5 when I went to homicide. So I was like, okay, now I feel like a little more confident in my skills and that I can contribute something to this unit. So, but yeah, when I went over, it was evenings, and everyone there, you had like Rick Duggan, and you had Steve David, Eddie Ibarra was over in SIU, and you had Ahern and Timmy Stewart. So you had so much seniority. All these people had been there for 10 years in homicide alone. So
Was John over there yet?
no, John
Really?
didn't. No, John came after me because he went to cold case unit,
Yeah, that's
and then
right.
when cold case dissolved, he came over to homicide.
That's right.
So-
So he went from robbery to cold case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that cold case unit. And actually, honestly, he solved the first cold case.
Yeah, did he?
Yeah,
I didn't know
it was
him.
in Alabama. Yeah, it was, and then they got the guy in Alabama. Yeah, he solved the first cold case, and when they started that up, and then they kind of dissolved it because of it was a strain for the rest, right? I mean, the caseload was getting heavier.
It got dissolved in 2019, and I'm not sure if you remember Murderous May. We had 42 murders in May, and there were 13 homicide detectives, so we each got 3.
Damn.
Which is just insane. Like it's so not responsible to give a detective 3 murders in a month. It's just not possible. So
What was the process of going from a unit like assaults that you basically were drinking from a fire hose, right?
Yeah.
Caseload wise, to go into a unit that you didn't have a victim that you can actually get their side of the story.
right.
What was that like, learning a lighter caseload but more in depth, different types of investigation?
Yeah, like it was so, I had a lot of misconceptions. I think in assaults, I was like, man, homicide, like they almost always solve their cases. They don't have as many. They don't know what it's like to have 40 a month like us, And of course, everything's different when you get over there. So in assaults, you're kind of just like working the cases that people are cooperating, working the cases that you have leads on, that kind of thing. In a homicide, like you don't, you're working every case. Every murder is important, and every murder you want to solve. And I think it's interesting for homicide because you really have to get creative sometimes in like creative investigations. Yes, there's obviously the traditional knock on doors, talk to people, old school cop work, but then you also have all this technology that's coming into play.
Social media.
So,
yeah.
Oh my gosh. And it's changed even from when I started homicide. Facebook was just starting to give us records, and now Snapchat, cell phone towers, phone dumps, geofencing, like there's just so much that goes into a case file. It can be like a terabyte of digital evidence. You've seen it.
Yeah,
Legal.
I've seen
It's
it, yeah.
insane. So
how long did you work in that job before you truly felt comfortable? I mean, like when you first got there, was there a time where you were thinking, God, I kind of feel overwhelmed? Or did you going from, because you're on a bigger stage,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the tradition of Dallas homicide, which is rich. and you, like you said, it is a different type of investigation. Was there a time where were you ever overwhelmed?
I mean, it definitely, as the years went on, the caseload picked up every year, so
Yeah.
it definitely kept.
But your experience gained too, so you
Yeah.
got more comfortable and you had your own niche. Okay.
And I had a good run. My first year, I solved every case, and so I was kind of like, oh, but I don't know that they were necessarily the hardest cases of all time. But it. I would say like at least a couple of years until I got into like having a couple of trials and stuff like that, because that's also a huge test. It's one thing to solve it; it's another thing to win it.
Yeah.
And so I
We're
think
gonna get into that.
Yeah, and so like doing that, I think. But my first couple of months in homicide, some really interesting cases. Zoe Hastings' murder happened. Kendra Hatcher murder, which is the dentist case, that's been on a couple of different publications.
Did you work on those?
Not really. I wasn't allowed to because of some administrative stuff. But that case happened around the same time as Zoe Hastings. We had the Texas A&M football player who killed the guy the same day as Zoe.
Yes, he was the wide receiver that months earlier had gone missing. No, years earlier, like 2 years earlier, gone missing from A&M, and they ended up finding him over in Southeast, actually.
Yeah, and he had killed that guy over in Northeast by White Rock.
Yeah.
Right by where Zoe was.
He had a machete, right?
Yeah.
Hacked him up with a machete.
Yep. And then we had a case of a guy found buried in concrete who had been dead for several months, and the guy stole his identity. And it's just, I was like, huge eyes, like, this is so cool, because
it's like which books you read.
Oh yeah,
before you got into law
the
enforcement.
truth is so much crazier than any kind of book or TV show, and in getting to be in on that and like see the whole thing unfold. It's like, if you like true crime or you like that kind of stuff, it's like imagining getting to be there and like contribute to it and figure it out. Like that's what it's all about. So
yeah. So can you? There's probably a lot of listeners that are across the country and even out of the country that they listen to this. And can you kind of just briefly describe the Zoe Hastings murder?
Yeah, so Zoe Hastings was a young girl. I believe she's about 19 years old, and she was found dead in a creek bed in the northeast part of Dallas by White Rock area. It turns out that the day before, she had been on her way to church, and she was returning a Redbox DVD at a Walgreens, and a guy grabbed her there, kidnapped her, and she was stabbed to death and sexually assaulted, and they ended up solving the case through DNA on the weapon, and the guy is serving life right now. So,
good.
Yeah.
Well, he earned that.
Yeah.
Why do they say the first 48 hours is most important in solving a crime?
I think it's just kind of the momentum of the case. One of the big things I always look at is victimology, which is when you go to the victim's family and find out, okay, who are they beefing with? Who's the problem? Is there a girlfriend? Is there a gang? Is there drug money? Whatever it is. And that's a good starting point. But also you have fresh witnesses. They just saw what happened, or you have the surveillance video you want to get before it's gone. You can still, track the suspect potentially if you have a lead of where they went or something like that. So you want to do as much as you can before everything kind of disintegrates, before people, I don't want to cooperate with the investigation, before, people get rid of stuff, and while people are still, remember everything. So the first 48 hours, I'm not sure if that is the slogan was just for TV or what, but it definitely is like you work it really hard, especially in the beginning. Like, while you're all there, do everything you can.
Because that's when the leads are somewhat fresh, right? And that even may change the way a witness can react after they have days or weeks to sit and stew on it. They may decide their story may change, because the mind is very wacky, that you can literally visualize things that didn't happen and add on to it. But in the first 48 hours, your mind doesn't have the chance to sit and stew on it.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's changing from things like that or changing intentionally where, someone got to you,
which
or
happens.
You don't want to deal with that suspect or whoever, which we do see that a lot. People are intimidated, and people, I'll give it to them, like, I don't have to live in that neighborhood where they know the suspect. And so it's easy as cops to be like, man, no one wants to cooperate.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I'm like, but I kind of do understand. Like, how do you live there and do that, and people know that you did that, and your safety and your family? So I do see both sides of the coin, but I still hope people do the right thing,
Yeah, I get it too, because they don't want to, they don't want to end up like the person. They don't want to
Yeah.
have you show up to their relative's house working there is because they did the right thing, and
Yeah.
that sadly happens. You
And
know,
like
and it's intimidation. I mean,
and like when they've seen a murder victim in that shop that they always go to every day, and now
Yeah.
it's like that's just a constant reminder of like this is where I live and this is what I have to deal with. So
no, I get it. Can you remember your first homicide case assigned to you?
my first case assigned, I was still in training. I was with Mark Ahern, and it was over at a high-rise, like the projects over on Channel 4 Southwest, I think on Fort Worth Avenue.
Yeah.
And Calvin Johnson, who's a lieutenant, he was a sergeant at homicide back then, was working an off-duty job. And these guys got into an argument, and shots were fired. Surveillance video, you see his headlights come on because Calvin was in the parking lot. So
Oh,
Calvin
wow.
arrested the guy. So it was kind of like not really difficult because Calvin was right there.
He on-viewed it, right?
Yeah, like he didn't
wow.
see the shooting, but he was like, he heard the gunshots and pulled around. And, you know, we had some witnesses and, you know, some issues with witnesses a little bit, but it went to trial. And I believe he got 27 years in prison.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Was it like a mutual combat?
They had been arguing in front of people, and I think the suspect went upstairs and got a gun and claimed the guy lunged at him or something like that. And so, you know,
You
shot
only
him
get
multiple
his side.
times.
The complainant can't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the witnesses, you have to look at, are they truly independent? Do they have a bias one way or the other to the victim or suspect? You know, people are going to tell you what's beneficial for them or for their friend. So yeah,
And then they work in the same mindset of fear
absolutely.
of actually giving the truth, right?
Yeah.
Or yeah, that's a never ending battle.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be on. This is going to air after we go on it, probably, maybe, I don't know. Depends on how quick Danny can get work. Danny's very busy right now, getting called out every day on SWAT. They're short-handed, so he does my sound. So we're going to a true crime podcast festival.
Oh, cool.
And it's going to be here in Dallas. It's a 3-day event, and yeah, it's you know, there's a lot of true crime. I mean, people eat that up.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. Like that's there's a reason why there's all these shows on Netflix and all that, because it's intriguing. I mean, it's like the ultimate crime and all of it. So
I watched a documentary on a murder, and it basically, this guy, he was smart enough to not have any. He murdered his girlfriend, but he did it. She was living out of state. She moved out of state. Well, he drove out there, and he did not. Actually, he rented a car to go out there. He did not take a cell phone, any electronics to get tracked out there.
yeah,
He goes out and murders her. He comes back. He turns the car back in. Long story short, the detective, the car that he rented, I guess in the grill had a certain type of locust that was only unique to that certain area that she was murdered in.
yeah.
And that was one of the big things to track it back. And, you know, it was fascinating. But
And that's like the creative investigations. That's
Of
where you have
course.
to kind of like think outside the box, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. I wouldn't mind rewatching that because it's
Yeah.
been a while. But it's fascinating, the little tiny details. And Alan Holmes talked about that when he, you know, he's like a robot with arms and legs, and the way his mind works. But the tiniest details, you can't overlook them.
Yeah.
In murders, since you don't have a complainant to talk to, can you just kind of explain to the listener that there's not a listener out there, even the old grunts and SWAT, they still, there's a fascination with a homicide investigation where somebody lost their life.
Yeah.
Can you kind of, in general, just kind of go over that process from whenever you get assigned the case, what your initial steps when you go to start looking into it?
So we have like a batting order basically for homicide detectives, and when you're up, you get called, and you could be, 2 p.m, 4 a.m., whatever it is, and you go out to the scene, and the first thing you do is kind of just find out like a general, like, what do we have? Like, do we know who the victim is? Are they at the hospital or at the crime scene? Do I have any witnesses? Do I have any surveillance cameras present? Do I know, is it a gunshot? Is it stab wounds? Is it whatever? Do I have the weapon? And you kind of get an idea of like a starting point of like, okay, where am I at? What do I need to work on? What can I do right now that's going to get me further in the investigation? And sometimes that's talking to the family, like I said, and getting kind of victimology information. Sometimes if you have cameras right there, like you want that video, like get me someone who can pull me that video so I can see it for myself. And so that's kind of the beginning of it. And then from there, we'll kind of, if we don't have a lot of witnesses, sometimes you have, like a body dump and you don't even know where to start. And that's when you rely on the ME's office for the autopsy and say, okay, what did they die from? What kind of object am I looking for? How long had they been dead? And just to kind of go backwards. And so the thing I love about investigations, I guess, is that you never know how a case is going to pop. Like, you don't know if it's going to be the magic phone call or if it's going to be a fingerprint or if it's going to be something on a cell phone. And so you want to check all the boxes, cast a very wide net. And then later on, that one thing will come back and you're like, I'm so glad I tried that, because you don't know how it's going to solve. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, preservation of evidence.
Yeah.
That's key. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's significant necessarily in the beginning. Like, you may see something in the crime scene, like a wrapper or a receipt, and later on that was what led you to the bad guy or whatever it is.
Yeah. Whenever a patrol responds to a scene, you as a detective, and you and basically patrol, usually they're the first responders to most of these scenes, even a dead body dump. What would you tell a young and old officer what could they do in the streets, being a first responder, to better assist you in your investigation when they first get there? What could they do?
I mean, basically, preserving the evidence as much as possible, crime scene protection, that kind of thing. Separating the witnesses is something I think that people don't always understand why it's so important. And the reason is because if you have two witnesses in the same car or in the same area, they're influencing each other's statements. They're repeating each other as opposed to from their memory. And so, I always tell people in cases, even though we're all in the same room, I'm looking at this corner, you're looking at that corner. So we all have different perspectives, and you may have seen something another witness didn't. And it doesn't mean that you're wrong or he's wrong. It just means that you have a different perspective. So getting those statements from witnesses to be as authentic as possible without influence of each other is so significant, I think. And it can make a huge difference in an investigation.
Excellent. I want to get into some cases you worked.
Yeah.
You brought a lot of here. You got a lot of detective notes here.
I do, because these cases are 6 years old, and a couple of 6 years old. But I was thinking about it, and I've been out on literally hundreds of murders, and so sometimes they kind of run together a little bit.
Yeah.
And so remembering the details is why I printed off just some PCAs to kind of remind myself of how that whole case went down, kind of a thing. All right,
detective.
Okay.
What are some of these cases you brought with you?
So I have some old cases, and I was just kind of going through them. So one case, I call it my brown eyes case, and this happened in May of 2016. And basically, we had a guy who was shot and killed over at the Days Inn Motel on Lancaster, which, if anyone's...
Very fancy.
Yeah, so nice. I mean, concierge and everything.
Yeah. Continental breakfast.
Yeah. It's near the truck stops, and so you have a lot of prostitution and stuff like that down there.
Really?
Oh, yeah, I know, right? But yeah, and I used to work this area when I was in patrol, so I kind of remembered it. But basically, this guy is found shot and killed on his balcony outside of a hotel. At first, we didn't really have much. We got a surveillance video, but I think we didn't get it to the following day. So sometimes that's a problem if it happens at 3 a.m, no manager there to pull it. So you just kind of go from there. We talked to his family. He had gone down there, and he was a truck driver, so he's familiar with the area, but he had a lot of cash that I think he would take down there, and he would get prostitutes and few drugs and that kind of thing. We found a cell phone in the room that didn't appear to belong to the victim, so we got a search warrant for it, dumped it, and we got some phone conversations that were actually audio recorded. And there was a female on it, and she was communicating with the victim about bringing over some drugs, bringing over a girl right before this happened. And so we knew, okay, there's probably going to be the prostitution or something like that involved.
He was ready for a party.
Oh yeah, he wanting some party favors, and he wants someone to hang out with.
Yeah.
So from there, I did a lot of work with the guys at South Central and CRT and things like that, people who knew the area. And I talked to basically any prostitute I could in that area who could kind of explain who this woman was and who she worked with and things like that. And, working these kind of cases, it's kind of funny because I never thought when I was in college at Nebraska in my sorority, I would be talking to Tea Bucket and Cinnamon and Pleasure and Precious and London. And I was just like, what? Like, sometimes you're just like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
But, so I talked to a lot of the girls who worked the area and found out who this woman was. Her name was Michelle. And from there, a girl came forward and we got some more information, a girl named Baby Girl. And basically, we found out the victim had a lot of money and he would frequently use this prostitute when he was there in the area. And the video showed a car pulling up with a guy and 2 females getting into the hotel room. You can see them struggling at the door and then they all run out. So when we picked up Michelle and Baby Girl, we got information about a guy named Brown Eyes. And they call him that because his eyes are bright, bright brown and really, stand out. And we brought in the girl, Baby Girl, and she gave us information, said that it was a robbery basically, and we got surveillance video of Brown Eyes with the 2 females beforehand. It was his car, all that information, and it wasn't anything super interesting. I think there was a fingerprint that he had in the hotel room as well. He eventually was brought in under arrest for capital murder. He confessed to shooting him, but said that he did not rob him and that he was just hanging out after he got paid, which makes no sense because I'm like, dude, if you got money, you're out of there. What are you going to do hanging out with this? So one of the girls said it was more of like, we're going to go to the ATM kind of a thing. So I believe they pled it down to murder and he got 30 years as a plea deal.
Okay. So it never went to trial?
No, it did not go to trial. He had a lot of violent felonies, but they gave him 30 years. So.
Okay. What was the biggest challenge in that case? Was it just getting rapport with the prostitutes, with Cinnamon and that?
I mean,
hodgepodge of nicknames.
Yeah, people don't love to talk to cops, especially when we arrest them, because people who are in kind of like high risk lifestyle. I mean, they see us a lot, and normally they're in the back of a squad car, so they don't trust us. And even though these women, a lot of them were not involved in this at all. They don't want to snitch on somebody in their profession, in their world. Well,
they have. It's like cops have a brotherhood and a sisterhood. Yeah. They have a sisterhood too, right?
Yeah.
And they have their own community as and
whether it's from friendship or fear and the pimp thing. I mean, all of it. Yeah. But so that was definitely something. But also too, I think when you have a case going to possibly trial, can you bring them on the witness stand? Are they a credible witness? Are the jury's going to like them, trust them? Right. So I think that's a factor when they decide about plea deals and all of that. I'm not a prosecutor, obviously, but that is what goes into it, I think.
Of course.
Yeah.
What are some of the other ones you got there?
So later on, like that same year, this was in July of 2016. So this was kind of interesting. Basically, we had a guy that was found over on Southeast in like a wooded area. An officer found him. She was out walking her dog, and I can't remember the officer's name.
Off duty?
Yeah, she lived over there.
Okay.
And so this guy is found probably a good...
That's the kind of things you find when you're out walking a dog in Southeast.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like it was, yeah. And so it was probably like 10 to 15 feet from the street, like on this kind of like, grassy, leafy area or whatever. And this old man was found face down, and he had a lot of maggots and things like that on him. Decomp. It wasn't like full decomp, but it was like, when you have cut injuries especially, they kind of gravitate towards open wounds.
Right.
And so I couldn't tell this guy looked like at all. He had no shoes on, but his socks were clean. So I'm like, okay, he's not walking like that, right? And when I went to the ME's office, couldn't get fingerprints, and they said, I don't know how he died. There's sharp injuries, but could it be a car accident? Could it be a stab wound? Like, I don't know. So I didn't really have much to go on. We ended up getting identification through his pacemaker. So I should have mentioned, he's probably in his late 80s.
Okay.
Or 90s. I think late 80s, if I recall. So he was an older guy. So once I found out who he was, he was from Red Oak. So I go to Red Oak and to try to do next of kin. He lives in a trailer park. When I get there, the sheriff's office is there with the next door neighbor who's also in a trailer. And I tell her, your neighbor died. And she said, I think my grandson may have something to do with that. Which I was kind of like interesting because he's in his 80s. I thought you would have been like, heart attack or something. And basically she said that the victim, his van was missing. and she hadn't seen him in a couple days, and he doesn't get around that great, so that didn't make a lot of sense to her. And while we were there, I got the information for the license plate, ran it, and found that it had just been crashed in Collin County. Just like in a car accident, left on the side of the road, airbags deployed, that kind of thing. And so we're like, okay, we have guy missing out of Red Oak, which is one county, found in Dallas County, cars in Collin County. So we have 3 counties involved in this thing. And so she tells me the name of her grandson. I kind of get a little more information. I talked to the victim's daughter. She gave me some bank information. I found a credit card transaction, and it was in, I want to say, Balk Springs, something like that. So I go out there, pull video. It's the van. And this van has like rust marks. It's like a green Plymouth or something. Very unique. It stands out. So when I see the video, I see the van pull up. I see the guy go in there, and it's the grandson. He's got the victim's credit card, and he's buying some cigarettes. And so I'm like, okay, I got something here that could be something, but I don't have a cause of death at this point. So it's kind of different from our usual cases where you're like gunshot wounds, whatever. I can't prove he murdered him at this point. Like, I don't know how he died. So I talked to some friends of the suspect, and they basically said that he made an outcry when they were drinking, like, haha, I killed someone, just kidding, that kind of thing. And they were, what was this van about, and how did you get there? And they didn't really understand what this van was about. So we take the van back and get it searched with a search warrant. We blue star it. Now, if people know what that is, but it's a reagent that reacts to blood.
Okay.
So you look at the van inside, and you don't really see anything like crime-wise, and then you hit it on the blue star and it lights up. And that was my first light up like a Christmas tree. We've heard that on.
Look like astrology.
Yeah, it does.
Look at that.
And I don't think I ever had a blue star case yet. It was like my first year in homicide, a year and a half. And so I was really excited that it actually worked, because I'm like, oh, this actually is what it is. So we get blood in the back, and now DNA takes forever. So I wasn't going to find out whose that was for a while, but we swabbed the airbag as well and all that. And the friend of the suspect had told me that, he crashed the car and said he was high and made a comment about stealing something from this guy. But again, I didn't have a cause of death. So the grandmother brings him down to talk to me. And this was a non-custodial. Even though it was non-custodial, I went ahead and I read him the rights, because I already knew this guy probably killed him.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and read him the Miranda warning. At first, he was just deny. And then he got really serious, and he said, okay, can I hug my grandma and my brother before I go? I was like, yeah, I'm not trading you promises for information, but I'm a reasonable person. He was very decent with me. I said, okay, yeah.
That's part of gaining rapport too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And this kid was I say kid, 19 or 20. He was young, and he had a drug history. So we're talking, and he starts crying. He was like, I needed drugs. I was high, and I just needed another fix. And so I went into the trailer, and I told him, give me everything. I need money. And he said, I killed him because he wouldn't give me the money. And which means he talked himself into capital murder. Even though he stole the van and used the credit card, you could argue that's not his intention. He did that after the fact. But because he said, I killed him because he refused, that's capital murder. So,
which is a higher charge to the listener.
Yes,
Yeah.
capital murder
And a
is
punishment,
the
too.
highest charge in Texas. And so it's life without parole or death penalty. And so, later on, do the testing, the victim's blood is in the back seat of the car, and the suspect's DNA is on the airbag. He was driving the car and everything. So everything kind of added up, and he said he dumped the body with someone else, didn't recall who the guy was. I really couldn't figure it out ever, because he didn't have a cell phone. So I never really found out who this mysterious Jack guy was that helped him dump the body. But so that case, they pled it out. He got 50 years. They pled it to regular murder, but 50 years is a pretty respectable number.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting thing with those 2 cases is they're both the same year. The suspect in the older man murder had no violent history. He had drugs and some petty theft. I don't think he was a documented gang member. Whereas the Brown Eyes case, to my recollection, I think he had some ag robs. He had been with DPD cases all the time, and stuff like that. Violent guy, and the rumor was that he had more bodies on him that nobody wants to talk about. So you look at, he got 30, younger kid gets 50, and it's because the younger kid told me it was a capital. I mean, he gave me the elements of the crime for capital murder.
Well, every case, any case you file, it is a case by case, circumstance by circumstance.
Yeah.
You know, that's how it's looked at.
Yeah.
There is a standard. There is a standard set when it comes to punishment, right?
Yeah.
But it literally still boils down to the jury, the judge, and the way it's presented, and the way it's argued against, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever see that movie 12 Angry Men?
Oh, I haven't, no.
Oh, my
I know
God.
of it. Yeah, I've just never seen it.
You actually need to watch the original because for an old black and white movie, that movie still holds up. You got 12 jurors deliberating in a room, and they're all big name actors, and it's 12 Angry Men for a reason, but it's really interesting that how their mind changed because other people show a different perspective of the type of, you really need to see. I think you would like it. It's a fascinating. I rewatched it recently.
Oh,
and,
really?
yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, I'll have to watch it for sure.
No, it's fascinating. So it sounds like this. Some of the cases, like you start off IDing about somebody about a pacemaker, okay,
Yeah.
and then it leads to this. I mean, all these different. It's like you're putting together a puzzle that's scattered on the floor, and it may have some other pieces that don't belong sprinkled in that you have to sift through.
Yeah.
Right.
And like that's one of it. Like it's just there's so many stories. I mean, not my case, but Grubbs had a case of a guy in a freezer. You know, a guy in like 8-9 pieces in a freezer, and identified him through fingerprints. But he also had a shoulder implant, and the guy was trying to cut off that so you couldn't read the serial number because it's identifying. So just like there's so many cases. Like it's crazy how much. You know, you can't make up this kind of drama. But to get to be a part of these cases from the beginning are just really interesting. So,
Do you have any other ones you want to talk about?
It depends. I mean, like I have a triple I did in 2020. It wasn't anything super complicated. Basically, I had 3 victims in a hotel room over on Northwest Division.
Channel 5. Shout out.
Channel 5, yeah. It was over on Gardner, the Super 7 Inn. Now, the good thing is, because of all of their high crime area, they have a lot of cameras and a lot of good cameras. Bad thing is the angles aren't that great, and so I couldn't really tell. But basically, you have a guy at the hotel who found 3 bodies in a hotel room, and 2 women and a guy. And at first, we were like thinking, could this be a murder-suicide situation? Like, because you see that sometimes with multiple deaths.
Yeah. It's like a family annihilator. And they
Yeah.
go in and,
Yeah. And so, but we never found a gun, and so we ruled that out. And so we had surveillance video, but I didn't know when this happened. We thought this was on I think this was like around 10 or 11 in the morning. And we later found out it happened the previous night at like in the afternoon, evening. And they just were not decomposing like we thought they were. So we thought it was fresher than it was, if that makes sense. I think the AC was on pretty high and stuff like that.
So factors like that would really,
Yeah. And then
okay.
and that's one of the things, like, you never know. Some people you're like, wait, how long have they been dead? And other people you're like, they just died. Are you sure? It's interesting.
But to the listener, I'm actually recording in a different room in the very accommodating office of the chief of police and on the 6th floor. And this room we're in, we are freezing. She's got a jacket on. I'm sitting here in a t-shirt, and I am freezing.
Yeah.
So it'll probably take longer for a body to decomp in this room.
Yeah, if we get left in here a while, it might take us a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are all factors that, you use to like establish a timeline if you can and things like that.
So in this case, it was different. So what else?
So basically, we got the surveillance video and finally found one person that went in the room, and he was only in there for a few minutes. And so I had a suspect vehicle description, and we put it out, to the media, and I didn't really have anything else. The family of the girl, so it was a woman, her mother, and then the younger woman's boyfriend are the victims. And so I gave next of kin to the family, and of course they were devastated because it wasn't just their mom, it was their grandmother too. So you had 2 women in the same family that were killed. And they said that there was this guy named Eddie that just got out of prison, that their mom used to kind of date on and off, and maybe it was Eddie. So the problem was no one knew who Eddie was, and they had dated on and off for a long time. And they said, maybe he's got ties to Fort Worth. So I called Fort Worth Homicide. I gave them the name from Facebook they have for him, the picture that's very old and not that good quality, and they check every database, and I cannot find this name anywhere. Like I've checked every variation of spelling of Eddie, Eduardo, all these things, can't find anything. I have a phone number in the victim's phone, and Peggy's phone, the older woman, of Eddie, and so I'm like, maybe it's the same Eddie. So I do a search warrant on it while I'm waiting for information to come in. Records take a while to come back. We finally do a track down with Sean Rabb, which is on Fox 4.
Yep, Fox 4. Shout out Sean.
And he'll do surveillance video releases and then an interview with detectives. And so we did a little bit of that, and I put that out on a Wednesday night. And the next morning, I get a tip, and this family calls and says, "That's our son." And they were in Azle PD, and they went to Azle PD and said, "That's our son. He's at the house right now. I'm scared. You should probably do something about that." So the son had told his mother something about like this girl, Rachel, who was the ex-girlfriend, the younger woman who was killed. He had said that she had murdered him and that he was an angel of death and this kind of talk. So we already kind of thought, okay, there's just something here with that. And at that same time, I got records back from the cell phone provider for Eddie's phone. It showed that Eddie's phone was in the area of the crime scene at the time that it happened. We also got the vehicle was towed up in, I want to say, McKinney. And so they had the vehicle from the night before where Eddie got stopped with the girlfriend. The vehicle is the vehicle. It matches it to a T. It had paper plates on it, of course, so I couldn't get anything with LPR, but that was the car. And now that Eddie's phone puts him there as well, I think I have Eddie. So Eddie gets transported down to Dallas PD headquarters. I issue an arrest warrant for capital murder at that point. The girlfriend was also seen on video, and like that is the girl on video who goes to the room. Now, she doesn't go inside the room. She just kind of like peeks in. I think she heard something, like 3 gunshots, and got freaked out. But then they leave. So on the video, he's in that room for less than 3 minutes. I mean, it's very quick. And so everything kind of lines up with that. She denies being there, denies knowing anything. She was from, I think, Honduras. And so I had to have a translator. And I don't think it was getting across the way I wanted it to with a translator. She was a great officer, but she hadn't done much interrogations in homicide. And so trying to like get her to like match my energy of like, we're going to go hard on her. You need to like turn up the volume a little bit. It didn't really translate well.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really get much from her. I interviewed him and got past Miranda and everything, and he just denied. And he was, I would say, very much of machismo, or it was a woman. I hate to say that, but it was he would not let me talk over. He would say like, "Calm down, sweetie," or stuff like that. And I'm already like really pissed off anyway.
Yeah.
And so he would talk over me. At one point we were both yelling at each other, and that's just not a conducive interview. Like, you're not getting anywhere with that. But you don't want to let them win either. And so it was hard to for me to just to stop and say, okay, am I actually gaining anything out of this? Does this look professional for, trial, whatever? And so, he never confessed. I think eventually he asked for an attorney. We later watched the video, and he moved the table, has a glass, and then he crossed himself and then put blood in his glass, and we're like, what the hell? We looked everywhere and there was nothing sharp. We're like, where did this blood come from? I don't know if he had a cut or what, but it was super weird.
It was a ritual, like a ritual.
It looked like a ritual. He crossed himself. And so we searched the van later in McKinney, and we find all these email addresses, and we find all this scrap paper. We find the dress that she had on the night of the offense. We later found out where they were staying in Fort Worth and have surveillance video of them leaving the Fort Worth hotel to go to the Dallas hotel. Same clothing in both videos. It's the same car. The time frame matches up with the phone records. It all kind of works out. I get Gmail records back from his Google accounts, searches about, which of the apostles committed murder, very much religious and stuff like that. And
what made you go that route? Just out of curiosity.
What made the Gmail accounts?
No, the apostle, what made you start delving into that?
Well, I mean, he had made comments to his mom, I'm the angel of death.
Okay.
And he said that Rachel killed me and I came back, and that people who are evil, and so he never came out and said I committed murder to anybody, but he certainly was in that ballpark. And
so that's you thinking outside the box to going into it's very fascinating.
in the especially with Google accounts, I mean, detectives know, like when you have Gmail, you can get some internet search history potentially. You can get phone numbers associated with that account. And so, like, finding out what their search history is, like he searched different kinds of firearms and things like that, different calibers that matched up with the crime scene. So even though I never found a murder weapon, I have this internet search history that shows the kind of gun that was used in the offense. So it's just one more thing to kind of add on to it. You know, one of the things I learned from detectives who taught me was like, you always want multiple connections because you don't know what's going to last from trial 3 or 4 years later. And we never thought COVID was going to be what it did to the, you know, but you want phone records, you want witness statements, you want on surveillance video, you want a confession, you want to get a social media conversation so that way, if the witnesses go away, if the confession is thrown out, whatever it is, you have other connections to build your case on. And so you always say, like, you know, you don't just want the sundae, you want the sprinkles, you want everything. And that's how a case is. Like, when you have a case like that and they want to plead, you're like, okay, I did good, because they don't want to try this in trial, you know? So, but later on, that was in 2020, I found out he wrote a letter to the judge about a year later saying he wanted to plead guilty, and wrote this whole long thing about why he did it. But like, you guys didn't have a good case on me, but whatever, I'll confess anyway. I'll take a plea. So he just pled to 60 years.
Wow.
Now, granted, it's a capital because it's multiple persons. 3 different people are dead, 60 years. The other option would be life without parole, but you have to look at his age and, you know, is he actually going to get paroled? And
he got 20, so basically 20 years per person.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
But again, you know, you look at all the factors, and like, I think a lot of people think life is just the ultimate, but if someone's 60 years old and then they get 30 years, I mean, it's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and this guy, I want to say he was like 35, 37, something like that. So
more than likely he won't see the light of day.
More than likely, no. I mean, unless he's a perfect prisoner and he's eligible at 30, but I don't know that he'll be a perfect prisoner, so.
No, he's being the angel of death and all. No, probably not. Yeah.
I mean, like, the letter a year later was like all this fantastical, like they were demons, and I have it on my desk actually, and I put it on my locker, so it's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, bad.
You know, like.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so yeah.
I gotta listen to these cases and the methods that you do clearly think outside the box, and your reputation is that from your peers. How the hell did murders get solved without videos and audios and social media back in the day? I mean, think about it. We are in the video age. Yeah. And even for officers working out in the streets with body cams, I mean, everything is on video. How the hell were murders solved? I mean, really, it's fascinating.
It really is. And that's why, like, I love talking to detectives who are like the old heads, you know, because you really did have to have you had to be good. I mean, you couldn't rely on a bit. Sometimes, like, that's why I say some of these cases
even DNA wasn't around.
No. And like some of these cases, I always say, like, you know, I didn't do much. I got lucky. I mean.
No, you didn't get lucky. You worked with what we had at the time, the capabilities and the sciences and technology that we had at the time, which that's a part of it now, but still it's a hell of a lot of work.
It is. But I mean, you know, there are some cases where, like, you'll do all these things, and then like on the Zoe Hastings case, when the DNA hit, we had not heard that name. He was not on the radar. Like, he wasn't a sex offender in the area. We were just like, who the hell is that guy? I mean, and so sometimes whether you get the video or the fingerprint, it hits it and everything else unlocks from there. And so, but yeah, I got a chance to meet Jim Lavelle.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was a detective on the JFK, everything, and super nice guy. But, you know, hearing his stories about working murders from the 60s.
Quite different.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. And I don't even know, you know, just all the procedures but, you know, now too, there's a trust issue with law enforcement and everything. And so I try to video and audio record everything. Yeah. Just so that we can give the prosecutor as much information as to how I solved it and who I talked to and what we said and that kind of thing as well.
Well, we actually had on Sonny Boyd, Elmer Sonny Boyd, and he's the oldest living detective that handled Oswald and Ruby, and the only time he was not with Oswald through that whole ordeal is when during the prisoner transfer, whenever he got shot. With,
he came up to Homicide when he was here. Yeah, we got a picture with. Yeah, you were up there. Yeah,
yep. Yeah, he came on and he's 94 and he's still sharp. Yeah, it's just his memory. It's incredible. Yeah, it was an honor to sit with that guy. What is there any cases that you worked and Andrea, you're very, I'm not going to say icy, but you were really, no, you were really, it didn't seem like a lot gets to you as far as you seemed to, whether it's from all these experiences to life experiences, you have a bulletproof mind. You seem very mentally just tough. Is there any case that just you worked that just, damn, it even affected you, like from an emotional standpoint?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like from patrol or detective?
Detective.
I mean, yeah, there are some. I mean, obviously, no one likes dead kids.
Yeah.
So in our department, child abuse will typically do child murders, but if it's a stranger on stranger or it's not obvious family violence, typically homicide will step in. So we had one recently that Grubbs has primary, and I helped him out on, and I believe that child was 3. I had a 2-year-old killed in 2020, but Grubbs had a case. So 2020 was weird because since I started in 2015, we hadn't had a single triple murder at all. And then 2020 came around and we had 4 different triples, and they were mostly domestics. And
COVID making people crazy.
man,
Being at home.
Yeah, people aren't supposed to be with their spouse
Yeah,
for 24 hours a
locked
day.
in.
Yeah. And so I don't know if it was whatever, but this guy, this terrible human being, he killed his 2 kids, his wife and himself. And when we got there to the hotel, he had killed them, I think the night before, and then killed himself like right before we all got out there. And he tucked himself in bed with them. So he moved his wife into the side, and then he put his arm around everybody, and he put their hands so that they were all like holding hands, and then he shot himself. So, and these kids were like, I want to say like 8 and like 10, maybe two sons. But the woman he killed was his current wife, not the children's mother. And he had sent her a message pretty much saying like, don't worry about the whole custody thing. I got it taken care of. And just as like a way to punish her for her life. And so, suicide is part of what we do too, as well as overdoses and stuff like that. And, that's sucks. But to take kids with you, especially, to take anyone with you, but especially to take a child with you. I mean, and, it's, you learn to compartmentalize what you see sometimes, and you just have to deal with it. But that case, I just remember one of the kids, when we moved to him, he had an expression on his face that just has always stayed with me. His eyes were just wide because I think his brother got killed first, and I think that's when he woke up and he realized, holy shit. And, this asshole shot him in the back of the head. And so, I don't like cry at scenes and stuff like that. The only time I ever got close to that was 7/7. Because I was working on 7/7, and but beyond that, kids are like usually, for most people, I would say, because we're used to kind of adults killing each other. You never really get fully used to it, but for kids, it's just like it's that line. Like there has to be like a line, and for some people there just isn't, and it blows my mind.
Evil is real, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, anything with kids, that's what sticks with me the most. I have an 8-year-old, and any of the listeners know, they know who it is. That makes me, heartbreaking.
Yeah, and mad. Like it's one of those things of like just angry.
Yeah, it's one thing dealing with 2 rival gangbangers.
Yeah, they live a high risk lifestyle.
That comes with that territory. Yeah. But these kids, they're innocent. They
trusted their father.
Yes,
like they would have never. Like they didn't do anything. And that's, like I said, the victims who really don't do anything, but the kids especially. It's just like there's a special place in hell for that guy, I think. I hope. Yeah, I hope he's got a few elevators down, right, and levels. Absolutely.
How do you deal with this? Like, what do you do? Because, DPD's starting up this new wellness unit, and I'm going to be a part of it. I'm going to work my ass off on this. Anybody knows me, I'm going to put everything into it.
Yeah.
How do you unwind with you? I know you read, but what do you do?
Not as much as I should, to be honest. I talked to my partner about this, and we're just so used to this pace. Like, it's not a good thing, but like I'm so used to just like constantly having 100 things to do. Like at any given time, I'm so behind on everything, and I'm trying to do better with that. But for me, hanging out with my friends, especially my friends who knew me before DPD life. So like my friends from college, my sorority sisters, I have a wine night on my street in my neighborhood, and they're awesome. And so just kind of being around people who aren't cops sometimes helps a lot, because it reminds you that you're still a person. Like, you're still like just who you were before you became a cop. And I like to travel. I just got back from a trip to Croatia this summer.
I saw the pics.
Yeah, it was so awesome. But like, just doing those kind of things, I think, help bring you back to your humanity a little bit and remind you that like the world isn't as bad as it seems. It's easy to go down that road and be like, God, there are so many bad people and so many people hate officers, but it's not true. It's just all that we see. That's what we see all day. So,
Well, like you said, you learn as an officer, whether you're working patrol or you work all the way in homicide, and all these many units in between, that we learn to compartmentalize and detach.
We have like crazy dark humor.
Yeah.
And people, I'm sure, if they came up to the 5th floor and just heard us talking without context, they would wonder what's wrong with us.
Yeah, they'd be appalled.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's like working with a bunch of brothers and uncles and dirty uncles or whatever. but it's because we can understand each other and we have no judgment towards each other because we've been through it. So,
have you ever worked a serial killer case?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I mean,
that's a good answer.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I don't know. I mean, I did help a little bit Brian Tabor on Shamirmir, but not a lot, unfortunately, because I had a bunch of cases myself at that time. So yeah, that was an interesting case.
That's a very interesting. That's the
you
one.
should get Brian on here for that.
Yes, I'd love to.
He's retired now. He'd be willing to do it.
Oh, he'd say a lot.
Yeah, he would.
We talked about the prosecution side. Now case filing is much different from 2015 to when you started, even going back to for the assaults.
Yeah,
it's much different of the requirements that we're under, right? And I got the legal in 2016. So from a case filing standpoint, evidentiary standpoint, and the amount of work that you have to do, and you factor in all the videos, ring videos, and all the cell phone information, computer information, cell tower. I mean, all of this, we have to comb through all that. Yeah. And get it to the DA for prosecution, and that's important. So the DA officers or detectives are required to give everything for to the case, and the DA has to comb through all this evidence. You know, we had DA Michelle Sugart. She talked about the Dr. Death case about having to comb through just hours and hours and hours of mountains of evidence, and just like you did, you comb through it, you give it to them, they comb through it, and then they prep and you go into court in trials. You've testified, right, several times. Okay. Testimony, folks, is not easy.
I hate testifying.
Yeah, it literally. I used to teach a courtroom testimony class, and everybody that I put through it saw benefit because our department doesn't. I don't. They really don't teach you. I mean, it's minimal, and a lot of it's learning as you go, but you really have to prep for that because as guilty as somebody is, you're still convincing 12 people of why you're right, right? And it needs to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah. Okay. And the defense attorney, they have a role just like a prosecutor. A prosecutor presents, and a defense attorney battles the prosecutor and battles you as a detective, a lead detective. That's you gather the evidence, and then a prosecutor presents it, right? Yeah. What is that feeling like when you're on the stand and a defense attorney defense attorney more than likely they know they're guilty, but they're doing their job to poke holes in your case. And
that's definitely, I mean, it took me a long time to kind of understand that, is that even though I may not like their tactics, defense attorneys have a role, and it's not the most perfect system of all time, but our country is very unique in that you can be judged by your peers, and you have a right to have a trial, and you have a right to have an attorney so like in that sense you have to respect what the whole premise is behind a jury trial. But I hate public speaking. I always get really red and whatever, mostly because people watching me, like being on the spot like that. And I try to do a thorough investigation, and I've never had like any significant complaints from a DA, but you want to do good and you want to win. So not knowing what they're going to ask me. When I was a rookie, I used to get very defensive on the stand. I was called a hostile witness a couple of times. And so I try to like balance that more as a detective and be as professional as I can, as clear spoken as I can, and get across to the jury like what I did. And, you know, one of the things the detectives told me, the old heads, were like, no matter what you did, if you got everything possible, they're going to find something. They just are. And it's their job not to convince them someone else did it. It's their job to poke holes. It's just their job to cause a little bit of doubt. Could an alien have done this? Like, I don't know. I mean, you know, like there's just something fantastical they're going to come up with. So not to take it too personal, because they're just saying whatever they're going to say. And they have a lot more leeway about what they can tell a jury or infer to a jury that may not be factual evidence. But we are bound by the law and the truth. But, you know, I just get up there and tell the truth and do the best that I can and try to admit when I make a mistake, because I do make mistakes. And yeah.
Well, yeah, anybody can hindsight and look back at
Absolutely,
anything done. Hell, somebody can critique my drive in here today, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to do that.
In every case you do, you get better the more you do it. I mean, it's like anything else. So.
But I'm sure every case, the ones that you even thinking outside the box and touching all these finer points, and you're refining all these methods, it's still, you can even look back from 2 years ago and think, I could have done this better. Or I could have done this, or
Absolutely.
I looked into this.
I look at my case files now from like 2016, 2017, 2018, and I have kind of a different style of my investigative notes, and I just do things a lot faster because I'm just so used to doing it. Like it's not unquestionable to do 15 search warrants on a case for me now. Whereas when I first started out, I do like 2 or 3, and now I'm just like, oh yeah, I can knock out 10. Like, it's crazy, but I've just had so many reps, you know, and that's one of the things that's good about Dallas, but it's also like, we're really busy. That's too many cases. But yeah, so.
Now, let me ask you this. So have you been part of an investigation that did not get justice that you worked on?
It's funny because that happened to me Friday.
Really? Okay.
Like 5 days ago. So, premise of the story, I guess, this guy was shot 16 times in the back on video.
Okay. Down
in South Central. And the defense attorney said self-defense because the victim threatened him first and suspect followed him and shot him down before he reached his car. And the jury came back Friday with not guilty after about an hour and a half. And I was just shocked because, I mean, we don't always get it on video, especially like the whole thing. You may get like a partial or car speeding off, but to get the guy standing over his body, shooting him on the ground over a dozen times, it's kind of insane. And so I was really upset all weekend, just thinking like, was it something I said? What did I do? Should I have tried that? And really just myself and the prosecutor and the investigator were all texting all weekend, like, what the hell just happened? Even so, you know, but I have to respect what the jury decided and not take it too personal. But it's hard not to when, you know, that was your case and that was your responsibility. So it's hard to see the family because they had to watch that video too. And then to see the guy who did that leave the courtroom. Like, I can't imagine.
They're hurting. I could tell the reaction from you. You're still bothered by it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, that's it. But again, it goes back to every case stands on its own. Yeah. Every case is looked at by those jurors or the judge. You know, everything is, it's a case by case deal and circumstances. And some guy again may get 30 years, right? Yeah. And then another guy get 50 for a murder. And then you got a guy that had a triple homicide and he gets 60. Yeah. You just never know.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like it's you never know what a jury's going to do, and that's why I try to tell families and people about plea deals. I'm like, it may seem like not enough, but you don't know what a jury. And you know, there are some great defense attorneys, and the defense attorney did a fantastic job. I mean, he was doing his job, and you can't fault that. That's what our Constitution allows for. But I know I heard the victim, I think, told some of the people that were there, it's like you just got killed all over again. And there's something I think I was telling a photographer that's been with our unit the last couple of months. If you've ever been to the courtroom in Dallas County, they're wooden pews. And they kind of remind me of a church. And so if you think about that, you're in a church at the funeral of that person, and now you're in that same hard wooden pew to find out what's going to happen if you're going to get justice. And it's kind of interesting, like the parallels, I think, for that in some respects.
It is.
So
It's fascinating.
yeah.
Can you talk about tab 7 and explain that, what that is?
So basically, we have these case files, our physical case files. Back in the day, before they had electronic case files, is pretty much that was it. And before I got to homicide, they started doing this way of organizing it, which has 31 tabs. So the different tabs are like your offense report, autopsy report, search warrants, that kind of thing. Tab 7 is where the PCA, the probable cause affidavit, and the arrest warrant goes. So the guys would always talk like, how's your case going? Are you on tab 7 yet? And so it became this like term of like, you always want to get to tab 7, you want to solve the case. And so it became kind of an inside thing with Dallas. And we kind of adopted it as our own. So I have no idea who started it.
No, I liked it. So basically, for the listener, for any case, whether it's a burglary, right, or a simple assault or a family violence assault, you start with the initial offense. There has to be an offense of a crime.
Yeah.
And then, like you're explaining the folders, to get to tab 7, which was your warrant of arrest and your probable cause affidavit that has to accompany that arrest warrant, that is getting probable cause through all the many building blocks of tabs 1 through 6.
Yeah.
7 is kind of the cherry on top of the case,
Yeah.
and that is when you establish probable cause and you can actually put an arrest warrant out for a suspect, which is that's your ultimate goal.
Absolutely, yeah. And like in all the tabs, like there's investigative notes, like they're all.
Yeah.
I don't know why 7 is where the arrest warrant goes.
It's a lucky number.
I guess
lucky
maybe
number
that
7.
must be it. But yeah, and it's when you look at a case file, a good case file, you should be able to read it, especially in the investigative notes tab 14, left to right, and understand what happened. How did I get there? And so it's explaining your work from A to Z, like first this happened and then this happened. And a good detective, a good case file, you can pick it up in 10 years and get justice for that family. We have no statute of limitations, which is why cold case murders are being solved 50 years later. And so the idea is that if you can't solve it now, you did enough good work that someone can pick up on it with a tip or whatever happens and take it all the way home for you. So that's part of being organized and being thorough.
No, they just solved a cold case here last week. I saw it from '89 that they got from a DNA off a bottle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, you don't know what's going to be the piece that's going to break it open.
Well, you read in the paper all the time of somebody that was killed in the 70s, and they're just now arresting some 80-something-year-old guy that did it and got away with it all these years, lived a whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he finally has to pay the toll.
And then a lot of the cold case ones, they're already dead or they're in prison.
Yeah.
And, and it's hard because there are some cases I have that are open. And, of course, I want to solve all my cases. But the reality is, especially in Dallas, I get a dozen murders a year. And that is like over double the recommended average by the FBI. And now that cases are so intensive in technology, digital evidence, and everything, it's hard to work 12 murders a year, plus help your squad on other cases, plus go on overdose deaths, plus do suicide investigations. I mean, we're going all the time. And so getting back to your old cases, it can be hard, but I don't want to ever put the file away and just be done with it forever if I can think of something that's new that I can try.
Well, another offense may occur unrelated to your offense that may
break it all open.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Like I said, you never know who's going to get arrested, who's going to know about that case or kept that text message, or I still have that knife, or whatever it is. And it just kind of, the dominoes fall from there. So.
And sometimes sadly they never fall.
And
Dallas has a it's littered with a bunch of whodunits.
Yeah, we call those Pams.
Pams?
Yeah.
What's that?
Pure ass mystery.
Pure ass. I love it.
That's what
I'm actually may title this episode that. Pure ass mystery.
Pure ass mystery.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, those are all the old heads way before my time. But yeah.
Hey, it still stands.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about your nonprofit that you started?
Yeah, so a couple of detectives and we started this nonprofit called Tab 7 Corp. A couple of years ago, everyone was like, we need some homicide shirts. And so I just got them made. And at first we donated money to different organizations like Widows and Children's. And finally, we've been asking for stuff like different programs for software, Nighthawk, Cellhawk, Cellbrite, different things for phone mapping technology and social media, analytics, and also training for detectives. And you know how it is with the government agency. It's always kind of like, well, the budget and maybe not, and it's too expensive. And so we decided, well, we're already making this stuff anyway for sale. Let's just use the money towards that. And so we just formed it last year. It's still relatively new. We're selling stuff this week actually at the Crimes Against Children conference. But the idea is to send detectives to different agencies to get more information and maybe get some licenses. And my long-term goal is I would love to have a North Texas Homicide Association or DFW Homicide Association, because you make these connections with people like in Fort Worth, but we don't share information like we should. And I think that's probably relevant to everyone listening who's in law enforcement, is that if I had access to that county jail database or this or that, who knows what we could solve if we just work together. But there's so many moving parts and we're all got so much going on. So the idea is to have an association where we can all have detectives from different agencies involved in it, up to date on the trends and different people going through the Metroplex, and get some of these cases solved and get people where they belong and get some justice for these families. So
I love it. Whenever this episode airs, I'm going to be putting out some information for your nonprofit and get y'all a website going by then.
We're slow because we've been working so many cases, but we're definitely trying to get a Facebook page or a website so we can get more information out there and get this thing off the ground a little bit.
Get it growing, get traction.
Yeah.
It's already, I mean, this is a type of offense and type of the importance placed on this type of offense and solving it and really networking like you talked about, because there's law enforcement agencies that if you work together, you could do a lot more. Oh,
yeah. And some agencies have a little more time because they don't get murders as much. And so they can do more things while we're taking care of our insane caseload. But yeah, it's just about working together, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. And whoever gets the glory, I don't care. I just want to get what's right and get the person put away. So.
All right. I have one final question for you. What would you tell an officer that wants to become a detective? That's their dream, to go to homicide. Mm-hmm. What do they need to work on and learn training-wise, what to attain that goal? What's going to help them the most?
So I teach at the Basic Academy with general investigations and the homicide practical, and I get that question a lot from rookies, like, how do I want to do what you do? I'm like, okay, cool. I think the biggest thing is don't rush it. I think people are always like, how much longer until I can be in homicide? Can I go to SWAT or out of patrol? But I think it's like any good detective, any good SWAT, any good whatever you do was a good street cop, because that's where you learn everything. That's when you learn how to talk to people, you learn how to problem solve, think outside the box, all that kind of thing. And so use the time you're in patrol to really master your craft and be really good at what you do. Go to as many hot calls as possible. Avoid doing the shortcuts. Don't ride a 5.8 because you don't want to do that 25 or that hard call. Take all the hard calls. That's how you learn. And between yourself and your partner or somebody you trust, you can figure it out. So the more you do that kind of thing, the less intimidating it is. You get good at patrol. People talk about you and your work ethic. If you're a hard charger, if you go after stuff, get some felonies all the time, people know. I mean, people in capers know who in patrol are badass officers. So we're like, man, get your stripes, promote, get up to homicide. Like, we're telling them, I can tell who's gonna end up there. And sometimes, it just comes down to building your reputation and doing the work. You have to you can't take the shortcuts, and you can't be a lazy ass officer and just ride a desk for 20 years and then expect to go to homicide, because at that point you've said who you are and by what you're not doing. So for me, I was really kind of nervous to go to South Central, but I stayed when I could have left, because the experience I got by kind of going to like a harder station, like the South stations, you learn so much just by reps. And I saw the detectives more on, I asked them questions, and I was that annoying officer who was like, hey, what are you going to do now? And like, what about this? And, you can tell if a person has that mindset of a detective mindset, because they just kind of see it. So I would and go to as much training as you possibly can. I did a lot of training myself that I just paid for myself or found on my own. If you wait for the department to cater your career, you're going to wait your whole time. So just make it happen yourself and promote as soon as you can, if you're in an agency that does that for purposes of getting detective. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Your reputation matters.
Oh, thank you.
And your reputation is amazing. And I think the listeners, I think this is going to resonate with them. You say you're not a very good, you don't like public speakings, but we're just in the very private confines of the DPD headquarters, but thousands of people are going to hear this. And
That makes me nervous.
no, don't be nervous. You did great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for helping or trying to help clean up this city streets.
Thank
The
you.
city of Dallas is lucky to have you in the property crime unit that passed on you. Shame on you.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Like I said, I mean, I didn't get a chance to work with you ever in patrol, but I always knew who you were. Everyone talked about Joe King at Southeast and Dope Chaser, and you had that reputation on the department as one of the best cops. I mean, truly, you are. And so I'm glad I get to work with you in this respect and the wellness program, hopefully a little bit, and that kind of thing, because you are, I think, what people don't understand is like your generation and like the cops, like you guys were like the varsity players. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. Like we looked up to you guys so much and still do. And like you guys are like, you're badass. So I appreciate
Well, that means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
it. Thank you.
The great Detective Isom, ATO fans, thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.